In this video I want to give you a short introduction to the UI system of Godot and show you with a simple example how to create your own UI and demonstrate a few of the most common used nodes. As programming language I will be using C#, but most of the video also applies to GDScript and all other supported languages. Let's start with a new empty project. The only thing I already changed is the size of the window when the game is started. And I imported some assets that I will be using. Link to the asset pack is in the video description. Now I create the first 2D scene. This will be our main scene that will be used when the project is executed. The first thing I want to talk about is the canvas layer node. This will be the parent node for all our UI components, because this will make sure that the UI is always on top and follows the current viewport or active camera. Here as an example is a clip where the parent node is not a canvas layer. When moving the camera, the UI stays at its position and is part of the game world. In comparison, in this clip, a canvas layer is used as a parent, and the UI follows automatically the camera and behaves like you would expect from a head-up display. This rectangle is the outline of the viewport, so everything we put into this box will be shown to the player. So it's important for us for arrangement and positioning of all the UI components. All the node types that are related to the UI are here under control, also visualized by the green color of the icon. Let's now create a basic control node. Nodes of the type control have two main purposes for us. First, we can use them to structurize our node tree better. For example, we now rename this node to PlayerInfo card. So all the components that are responsible to display the player info, we will put down here as children. The second purpose is to set the anchor points. The anchor points are visualized with these green thingies. They're responsible to handle how the UI should react on different window sizes. Here are 3 short examples to demonstrate the use of the anchor points. Here in the first one, the anchor point is at the top left, so the rectangle always stays at the top left of the window. In the second example, the anchor points are at the bottom right side, so the UI also stays at the bottom right. And in this last clip, the anchor points are in the center. To set the anchor points of a node, you can just drag the green thingies where you need them. Or you can use this helper at the top with some predefined scenarios, like the examples I just showed you. Top left, bottom right and center. Let's add now the first node that is also visually visible, a panel. The panel is a simple node that can be used to display a texture that we beforehand created in photo editing software or similar, or like me, you can use assets that somebody else created. Again, a reminder, the link to the assets I use are in the video description. When working with UIs, it's common to use 9-slice scaling. With this technique, the texture is split into 9 parts to prevent image scaling distortion. So the texture looks good independent how big or small the UI component is. These margins to slice the texture into 9 pieces can be set under texture margins. Now I drag the panel a bit bigger and place it here in the top left. And we have the background for our player info. The next node type is the margin container. Node types that have container in the name are not visible, but they change the behavior of the children. Click here on the full rect preset so the container fills the whole background panel. Under theme, overrides and constants we can set the margin we want for left, top, right and bottom. In my case 10 pixels. The margin container node makes sure that all child nodes will be used these margins. In this clip you see the margin container in action. It makes sure that the red rectangle keeps its margins from the blue one. Next are 2 node types that are pretty similar, HBox container and VBox container. They both control how their children are positioned. All the children of a HBox container are ordered from left to right, or right to left. And all children of a VBox container are ordered top to bottom or bottom to top. For our example PlayerInfo, I now create one HBox container that has 2 VBox containers as children. These containers are not visible for us, but we need to imagine how the HBox divides our space in left and right, and in both sides is one VBox node. All nodes we put under the first VBox will be visible on the left side from top to bottom, and everything we put into the second VBox will be visible on the right side from top to bottom. Under the first VBox container I now create a node of type textureRec. This will display the icon of our player. Under the second VBox container I create a label and a progress bar node. With the label node we can display whatever text we want. We just have to put it here into the text area. By creating a label setting, we can modify how the text looks. We can choose a font, font size, and font color. We will be using this label to display the player's name onto the player info. Now onto the progress bar. Here are quite a few settings we can change. For this example, I want to hide the percentage and set the value to a bigger number so some progress is visible. To make the bar a bit thicker, we can go under Layout and set the Y value of the custom minimum size to 20. The last thing I want to change is the texture. So under Theme Override, Styles, I create for both background and fill a new stylebox texture. And select this green texture. And set up the 9 slice I mentioned. To make the difference between background and fill better visible, I now set the modular color of the background texture stylebox to gray. This will make the whole texture a bit darker. Now only small adjustments are left for the player info card. Select HBox container, under Theme Overrides, Constants, set to 25. This will increase the spacing between the children of the HBox container. Set alignment for both VBox container to center. For the second VBox container, under Layout, Container Sizing, tick the Expand box. This will let the progress bar take all the space it gets. And now we are done with the visuals of the player info card. On the bottom right, I now want to create a second UI component. This will be the control panel that can be used to modify the player info card. To save some time, I already prepared here a few nodes for it. It's pretty much the same structure like for the top left UI. Nothing new, so you should be able to do it yourself. With the control panel, I want to be able to change the player's name that is displayed in the info card. To be able to input a new name, we use the node of type lineEdit. Under placeholder text, I enter a new name, so it's better understandable what the input should be. The lineEdit node has a lot more settings that can be changed. For this example, we don't need them, but feel free to play with them or read the documentation to understand what each setting does. I now change the visuals of the input field a bit. Under Theme Override, I change following settings. Set the font color to black and font placeholder color to dark gray. Under Constants, I set the minimum character width to 10. This makes the input field more wider, so we can better see what text we write. I also change the font and font size. As last thing, I create a new stylebox texture. Select this gray box texture and set the texture margins to the correct values. Right next to the line edit, I now add our first button. This will be the confirmation button, so only when this button is pressed, the new name that is written into the input field will be used for the player info card. The button node has a text property, so here we write what text should be displayed onto the button. Again, I now change a few settings to change the visuals of the button. Under Layout, I set the custom minimum size to 350 and 70. This will make the button a bit bigger. I set the first 4 font color settings to black. This will make sure that our text will be black in all different states that the button can have. And create for the 3 states, normal, hover, and pressed, each one stylebox texture. And assign this blue button texture and set the texture margins. For the hover state, I also set the modular color to gray, so it's good visible when you hover the button. The last part of our UI example will be 2 buttons, one to remove 10 HP from the player health bar and one to add 10 health points. It's the same process like you just did for the change name button, so I will also skip this part. When you're done with setting up everything, your control panel could look like this, but feel free to change all parameters to your liking. One thing I also want to mention and show you very briefly is the theme editor. With themes, it's possible that a type of UI node, for example all buttons, share the same style, so look all the same, without setting up every button individually. And you can create different themes for your players to choose from, whatever UI style they like more. Select the Control Panel parent. Under Theme, create a new theme. Now at the bottom, here's the Theme tab. On the left side is a preview of how the UI nodes look with the current theme. I now want that all buttons under the Control Panel node are yellow with a green font color. Press on the plus and select the node type you want to change. In my case, the button. Now you can change all the settings you already know from the theme override section. So select the yellow texture, set the texture margins, choose the font size, and font color. You already see how the preview of the left side gets updated. But our buttons on the scene still look the same. That's because we used theme overrides before. So we override everything that is defined in the theme. So we need to remove all the theme overrides from the buttons, so they can use the settings of the theme. This was a very short demo of the Godot theme editor. I think it's quite powerful, so feel free to try it out or do your own research. And now we can move on to the coding part of the video. From a visual point of view, we are now done with our user interface. But right now it's not really functional, and pressing the buttons does nothing. So now it's time to write a few lines of code. Like already mentioned at the beginning, I'm using C#, but in the other languages it's pretty much the same, so feel free to follow along even though you're not using C#. Let's create a new script and call it ControlPanel. We start with the functionality to change the player's name. We declare two export variables. One label. This is the label of the PlayerInfo card that displays the player's name. The second is the line edit node we use to input the new name of the player. We create a new method, change player name. Here we take the value of the text property of the line edit and assign it to the text property of the player's name label. So we take whatever text is written in the line edit and display it with the label. And then we set the line edit text to an empty string, so it clears the input field and the player can input again a new name. We save the script and go back to Godot. Here I press the build button, so Engine is informed about our export variables. I assigned the ControlPanel script to a node in the scene tree. For this example it's not really important what specific node. I'm assigning it to the canvas layer node. When selecting the canvas layer node, the two variables we exported are now visible. I now assign the label in the line edit to the corresponding variable. When we now run the game and press the change name button, we see that even though we added our script with the coding, nothing happens. This is because the change player name method is never called and executed. To fix that, we want to subscribe to the pressed signal of our button. When the button is pressed, it raises a signal called pressed, and all nodes that are interested can subscribe to this signal. So we want our ControlPanel script to subscribe to this signal. So the script is informed when the button is pressed and it needs to execute our method. This subscribing can be done in two ways. I prefer to subscribe by code, but I also show you how to do it with the help of the engine's UI. Select the button in the scene tree. On the right side, change to the Node tab. Here you can see a list of all the signals this node can emit. Double-click on the pressed signal. Now this window should open. Here you select the node that got your script assigned, in my case, canvas layer. Click on Pick. A second window should open. Here you see a list of all the methods that this script has. Here you select Change Player and press OK, and then Connect. That's it. Now the method is subscribed to the pressed signal of the button. Now I just move this connection and show you how to do the same thing but in code. First we need a new export variable. Here we will later assign the button. Now we go into the ready method. We take the button and choose the press signal. To subscribe we write += and then the method that should be executed when this signal is emitted. It's not necessary for our example, but to unsubscribe you just have to replace the plus with a minus. Save the script, go back to Godot and press the build button. assign the change name button to our export variable. Now everything should be set up and we can test. And yeah, we can input a new name, press the button, and the label is updated accordingly. Now that we know how to subscribe to a signal of a button, it's not that hard to add the functionality to the +10 and -10 button. I create 3 new export variables, one for the plus button, one for the -10 button, and one for the progress bar, that will be our health bar. I create 2 new methods, one that is executed by pressing the +10 button, and one for the -10 button, and subscribe the press signal of the buttons. Same thing like we did for the change name button. And don't forget to assign the nodes to export variables. Now that everything is set up, onto the real logic to increase or decrease the HP bar. I create the player health variable. Small disclaimer here, in a serious project you would like to keep game logic and UI separate. So we would put this player health in our own player class. The rest is quite simple, we just increase or decrease the player health by 10. And after that, assign the new value to the value property of the progress bar. Save the script and test. And yes, it works like intended. With that we are done with our small Godot UI example project. I really hope I could help you a little bit with this video. I would really appreciate some feedback on how you like this tutorial, because it was my first one and it was really difficult to decide which parts to cover and in what detail. Thanks so much for watching and have a nice day.